My phone buzzed while I was stirring lentils on the stove. Not a call. Not a message from family. A bank alert. Account access removed. I stared at the screen. Read it again. Then again. Removed. That's when my hands started shaking. My name is Nana May, and this happened to me. The pot boiled over, foam sliding onto the burner, but I couldn't move. The words burned into my eyes. Account access removed. The same account where my pension arrived every month. The same account I had shared, because I trusted her with my daughter. Why was I the last to know? I turned off the stove, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to breathe. I wasn't angry yet, just confused. For 30 years, I had woken before sunrise, cooked for my children, cleaned their uniforms, stayed awake during their fevers, sold my jewelry to pay school fees, smiled when my husband passed, and told myself, at least I still have my children. And now the bank was telling me I had no money, no warning, no explanation, just silence. I opened the family WhatsApp group, the one called Our Home Red Heart. Last message, a photo of my daughter and her husband on a beach. She was wearing sunglasses, smiling like she had no worries in the world. The caption said, finally, dream trip smiling face with heart eyes. Everyone had reacted with hearts. Everyone except me. I scrolled, laughing emojis. Enjoy. Safe travels. So happy for you. I typed then erased. Typed again. Where did you get the money? I erased it. Instead, I wrote, did something happen to our bank account? Seen. No reply. That silence felt louder than any scream. I stood up, paced the small kitchen, touched the refrigerator door like it could hold me steady. This house had seen everything. My tears, my prayers, my loneliness. It had never betrayed me. But my own child had. Or at least, I thought she had. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mrs. May, a cold voice said. Yes. This is from the bank. You are no longer the primary holder of your pension account. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I whispered. I opened that account myself. There was a digital authorization submitted 2 days ago. My throat tightened. By who? There was a pause. By your daughter. The world went quiet. I wanted to shout, to demand, to cry. But instead, I said, she wouldn't do that without telling me. The man cleared his throat. You can file a complaint, but access is currently blocked. The call ended. I sat there in silence. After everything I sacrificed, when did I stop mattering? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt like betrayal. The fridge humming, the clock ticking, the distant dogs barking. I replayed her childhood in my mind, her small hands in mine, her voice calling me mama. Had I raised her like this? In the morning, I decided to go to her house. Not angry, just needing to understand. Her doorbell camera blinked red when I arrived. She opened the door, surprised. Mama, why didn't you call? I smiled weakly. I wanted to see you. She looked nervous. I stepped inside. The house smelled of expensive perfume. New furniture. A flat-screen TV I knew she couldn't afford. I sat. She stood. We both waited for the other to speak. Finally, I said, the bank said you changed the account. She looked away. It was just temporary, she said quickly. We needed money for a trip. You weren't using it. My chest tightened. That's my pension. She sighed. You live with little. You don't need much. That sentence cut deeper than any knife. I nodded. I'm not angry, I said softly. I'm just hurt you didn't think of me. She crossed her arms. You're overreacting. I stood up. I'll go, I said. We'll talk later. She didn't stop me. At home, I cried quietly into my pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. But peace doesn't mean safety. 3 days later, she returned from the trip. I was invited to dinner. I brought homemade bread. She laughed loudly, told stories, showed photos. No apology. No explanation. Just smiles. After dinner, she went to the kitchen. That's when I heard it. A scream. A loud, sharp scream. She ran into the living room, face pale. Mama, she said, shaking. What did you put in the fridge? My heart pounded. What do you mean? She pulled me toward the kitchen, opened the fridge. Inside, on the top shelf, was an envelope with her name on it. She opened it. Her hands trembled. Inside were printed screenshots, bank statements, account changes, and a note. I trusted you. Now I'm learning the truth. She looked at me, terrified. How did you get this? She whispered. I met her eyes. I didn't, I said. And that was the moment I realized. Someone else was watching our family, and they knew everything. I stood in her kitchen, my heart still pounding from the way she screamed when she saw that envelope in the fridge, and for a moment neither of us spoke, the air heavy with questions neither of us wanted to say out loud. Because once spoken, nothing would ever feel safe again. And when she finally whispered, "Who is doing this to us?" I could hear fear in her voice that I had never heard before, not even when she was a child. And that fear told me this was bigger than just my pension or her trip. Something was unfolding behind our backs, quietly, deliberately, and I didn't yet know whether to feel relieved that the truth was coming out or terrified of what it might destroy. She closed the fridge slowly, as if the envelope might explode if she moved too fast, and she turned to me with eyes full of suspicion and confusion, asking again where those papers came from, and I told her the truth, that I had not printed them, had not placed them there, and that I had only found out about the account change from the bank itself. And the moment I said that, I saw her face change, because for the first time she realized she was not in control of the situation anymore. That someone else knew what she had done and wanted her to feel the same shock and helplessness I had felt when that bank message appeared on my phone. She sat down hard on a chair, covering her mouth with her hand, and whispered that this was impossible, that no one else had access to her phone or laptop, and I wanted to ask her how she had accessed my account in the first place. But I stayed quiet because I could see panic rising in her chest, and part of me, the part that still remembered holding her as a baby, didn't want to push her over the edge just yet. So instead I said softly that maybe someone from the bank had made a mistake, even, though I knew that wasn't true. And even though deep down I could feel that the truth was waiting just beyond the next door. She suddenly stood up and grabbed her phone, opening WhatsApp and scrolling quickly, her fingers shaking, and then she froze, staring at the screen like she had just seen a ghost. And when I asked what was wrong, she hesitated before turning the phone toward me. And I saw a new message in the family group chat, sent from an unknown number, with no profile photo, just a gray circle, and the message said, "You shouldn't have taken what wasn't yours." And beneath it was a short voice note, only 7 seconds long, and when she pressed play, a distorted voice filled the room saying, "This is only the beginning." My heart raced, because I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about exposure, about someone wanting to reveal something hidden. And the way my daughter looked at me then, pale and shaking, made me understand that she knew exactly who could be behind this, even if she was too afraid to say the name out loud. And when I asked her if she recognized the voice, she shook her head quickly, but her eyes betrayed her, flickering toward the hallway, as if the walls themselves might be listening. She told me she needed air and stepped outside onto the balcony, and I followed her, the night cool against my skin. And for a moment we stood side by side in silence, the city lights glowing below us, and I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her that no matter what, I was still her mother. But before I could speak, she said, "Mama, you don't know everything about me." And the way she said it made my stomach drop, because it sounded like a confession she had been holding inside for years. And I suddenly understood that my pension was only the surface of something much deeper. She told me that a year ago, when her husband lost his job, they had taken out a secret loan, one she had never told me about, because she was ashamed and afraid I would worry. And when the bank started calling, threatening legal action, she panicked. And that was when she remembered my account, how my pension came in every month like clockwork, and how I trusted her completely. And she said she never meant to hurt me, that she planned to return the money after the trip, because the trip was supposed to help her husband close a business deal. But as she spoke, I realized she was still justifying herself, still seeing my sacrifice as something she could use without permission. And that realization hurt more than the loss of the money itself. I told her that trust once broken is not easily repaired, and she began to cry, saying she felt trapped, that she was drowning in debts and secrets, and that someone must have hacked her email or bank app, because only a few people knew about the loan. And when I asked who those people were, She hesitated before saying her husband, the loan officer, and one more person, someone she refused to name. And that was when the fear returned to my chest, because the way she avoided my eyes told me this person was closer to us than I wanted to believe. Later that night, after I returned home, my phone buzzed again, and this time it was a WhatsApp voice note sent directly to me from the same unknown number. And when I played it, I heard the same distorted voice say, "She thinks you're weak, but you're stronger than she knows." And those words stayed with me because they felt like a challenge, like someone was trying to pull me into a game I didn't understand yet. And for the first time in years, I felt something other than sadness and confusion. I felt a small spark of anger, not the kind that explodes, but the kind that sharpens your senses and makes you see clearly. The next morning, I went to the bank in person, determined to learn everything I could. And when the clerk recognized my name, her expression changed, and she whispered that my account was under review because of suspicious activity. And when I asked what kind, she said multiple logins from different devices, some from locations far from our city. And that was when I realized this wasn't just my daughter's doing. Someone had been watching, waiting, and using her mistake as an opportunity to step in. And as I left the bank, my phone rang again, the same unknown number, but this time, instead of answering, I let it ring because I knew whoever this was wanted me to react, and I wasn't ready to give them that satisfaction. That evening, my daughter called me in tears, saying her husband had received a legal notice about the loan, that the lender was demanding immediate payment, and she asked if I could forgive her, if I could help her again. And for a moment, I almost said yes, because that is what I had always done. But then I remembered the message, "You shouldn't have taken what wasn't yours." And I realized that helping her without understanding the full truth might only pull me deeper into a situation I couldn't escape from. So I told her I needed time. And when I hung up, I felt both guilty and strangely empowered, as if for the first time I was choosing myself. That night, as I lay in bed, I kept thinking about the unknown sender, about how they knew our secrets, about how they seemed to want me to see what my daughter had done. And I wondered if this was revenge or justice or something even darker. And just as I was drifting into uneasy sleep, my phone buzzed one last time, and the message said, "Tomorrow you will learn who I am." And my heart raced because I knew that whatever was coming next would change everything I thought I knew about my family. I barely slept that night because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message again, the one that said I would learn who they were, and it felt like a countdown was ticking inside my chest, each second pulling me closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. And when morning finally came, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my phone, waiting, wondering if they would call, text, or simply appear at my door. Because at this point, nothing felt impossible anymore. The message arrived just after 10. It was another voice note from the unknown number, and when I played it, the distorted voice said, "Check your old emails." The ones from 5 years ago. Then you'll understand, and the moment I heard that, my heart sank, because 5 years ago was when my husband died, when my world fell apart, when I was too broken to notice what might have been happening around me, and I realized this person knew not just my present, but my past as well. I opened my old email account, the one I rarely used anymore, and started searching by year, my fingers trembling as memories flooded back. Messages from relatives offering condolences, from banks asking for documents, from lawyers explaining legal steps. And then I saw a thread I didn't recognize, titled simply regarding the property. And when I opened it, my breath caught, because it was a conversation between my daughter and someone else, someone whose name made my heart stop. It was my sister, my own sister, the woman I had trusted with my grief, with my children, with my home when I was too weak to manage everything alone. The emails showed how they had discussed transferring certain documents, how they had talked about temporary control and future security, and the dates matched the time when I had signed papers I barely read, trusting my family to guide me. And as I scrolled, I realized that my pension was not the first thing taken from me. It was only the latest, and the anger that rose in me was quiet but powerful. Because betrayal from blood cuts deeper than any stranger ever could. My phone rang, and this time I answered. "Now you see," the distorted voice said. "They've been planning for years." I asked who they were, and the voice replied, "Someone who got tired of watching you be used," before the call ended, leaving me shaking, because I didn't know whether to feel grateful or manipulated. And as I sat there staring at the screen, I realized that everything I thought was coincidence was actually part of a pattern, one designed to keep me dependent and silent. I called my sister. She didn't answer. I went to her house. The door was locked. And as I stood there, I understood that the family I thought I had was already gone, and the truth had only just begun to surface. I stood outside my sister's locked door longer than I should have, staring at the peeling paint and the rusted handle as if they might suddenly explain how everything had gone so wrong. Because in my heart, I still wanted to believe there was a mistake, that I had misunderstood those emails, that maybe grief had made me suspicious. But the silence behind that door felt heavy, like it was hiding more than just empty rooms. And when I finally turned away, I felt a strange mixture of anger and sadness, the kind that makes your chest ache in a way that doesn't go away. On my way home, I kept replaying the words from the voice note. They've been planning for years, and I realized how many moments I had brushed off, how many times I had let others decide for me, because I was tired, because I trusted them, because I didn't want to cause trouble, and now every one of those moments felt like a door I had unknowingly opened, letting something dark walk right into my life. When I reached my house, I found a small brown envelope slipped under my door, and my heart raced as I picked it up, because I already knew who it was from, even though there was no name, no return address, just my handwriting from an old form written across the front. And inside were copies of documents I barely remembered signing, property transfer forms, account authorizations, consent letters, all with my signature at the bottom. And as I stared at them, I remembered sitting at a table. Years ago, my sister and daughter beside me, telling me it was only for convenience, only so they could help manage things while I was grieving, and I had believed them because at that time I was too broken to question anything. My phone buzzed again, and this time the message said, "You didn't lose your power. You gave it away, but you can take it back." And those words echoed in my mind because for the first time I saw my situation clearly, not as a series of accidents, but as a slow, careful stripping of my independence, one signature at a time. And the realization hurt, but it also awakened something inside me, a determination I hadn't felt in years. I called my daughter, and when she answered, her voice was tense, like she was expecting bad news. And I told her about the emails, about my sister, about the documents. And at first she denied everything. Then she fell silent. And that silence told me more than any words ever could, because it was the silence of someone who had been caught. And when she finally spoke, she said, "We were just trying to protect you." And I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat, because control disguised as care is still control. I told her I needed the truth, not excuses, and she confessed that after my husband died, she and my sister had worried about money, about the future, about what would happen if I got sick. And instead of talking to me, they decided to manage things for me, moving assets, changing access, making decisions without my consent, believing I would never notice or question it. And as she spoke, tears streamed down her face. But I couldn't ignore the fact that she had chosen convenience over honesty. And that choice had cost me my trust. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the documents spread out before me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone standing at the edge of a decision, one that would determine whether I stayed silent or finally spoke up. And as I looked at my signature on those papers, I whispered to myself, "This ends now." Not knowing that the next day would bring a confrontation that would shake my family to its core. But it was also clarifying because for the first time I saw the pattern instead of isolated moments. And that clarity gave me strength. I typed a message, erased it, typed again, my hands shaking, and finally sent, "We need to talk today." All of us. No excuses. And within seconds, the blue ticks appeared, but no one replied. And that silence felt like a challenge, as if they were daring me to say more, daring me to finally break the role they had assigned me. The quiet, grateful mother who never asked for anything. And I realized that the power they had over me existed only because I had allowed it to continue. Later that afternoon, my daughter arrived with my sister, both of them tense, their faces guarded. And as they sat in my living room, I felt a strange mix of fear and resolve, because confronting them meant risking what little peace I had left, but staying silent meant losing myself completely. And when I placed the envelope of documents on the table between us, the room seemed to grow smaller, as if the walls themselves were listening. My sister spoke first, saying they had only wanted to help, that I was too trusting, too vulnerable after my husband's death, and that they thought it was better if they handled things. And as she spoke, I felt anger rise in me, not loud or explosive, but sharp and steady, because they had never once asked what I wanted, never once treated me like an adult capable of making my own choices. And that realization stung more than any insult ever could. I told them that help without consent is not help, that love without respect is not love. And for a moment, neither of them could meet my eyes. And in that moment of silence, I saw their guilt, but also their fear, because they were beginning to understand that the power dynamic was changing, that I was no longer the woman who would quietly accept whatever they decided for her. My daughter started to cry, saying she was sorry, that she felt trapped and desperate, that she never meant to hurt me, and part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But another part of me knew that doing so would only return us to the same pattern. So instead I said softly, I forgive you, but forgiveness does not mean permission. And the words felt heavy, but right, because they were the truth I had been avoiding for too long. Just then, my phone buzzed again with a message from the unknown number. And when I read it, my heart skipped because it said, "You're doing the right thing." But this isn't over. And I realized that whoever was watching wanted this confrontation, wanted me to reclaim my voice, but their motives were still unclear. And that uncertainty sent a chill through me, because I didn't know whether they were a protector or a predator. After my daughter and sister left, the house felt eerily quiet, and as I sat alone, I wondered what consequences my new resolve would bring, because I could feel that something bigger was moving behind the scenes, something that would soon force me to choose between safety and truth. And as I looked at the door they had just walked through, I sensed that this was only the beginning of a much deeper reckoning. The house felt different after they left, quieter, but also heavier, like the walls were holding their breath, waiting to see what I would do next. And for the first time in years, that silence didn't scare me, because I knew it was no longer empty. It was filled with something new, a strength I had forgotten I possessed. And as I washed the cups they had used, I noticed my hands were steady, not trembling, not rushing, just calm, as if my body had accepted the decision my heart had finally made. That evening, I received a call from the bank, and this time I didn't feel that familiar knot of panic, because I knew I was not powerless anymore. And when the clerk said they needed me to come in to verify documents, I agreed, already planning what I would say, what I would demand. And for the first time, I felt like the conversation would be on my terms, not theirs. The next day, I walked into the bank with my head held high, carrying the envelope of papers that proved how my trust had been used against me. And as I sat across from the manager, I explained everything, from the unauthorized changes to the hidden emails. And when I finished, he looked at me with a mix of concern and respect and said they would open an investigation, that my access could be restored, but the process would take time. And although I wanted it fixed immediately, I understood that real change is rarely instant, and patience was now part of my new strength. When I left the bank, my phone buzzed again with a message from the unknown number, saying they're starting to worry. And I realized that my quiet actions were creating ripples, that the people who once felt so secure in their control were beginning to feel uncertain. And that shift, subtle as it was, filled me with a sense of justice, because it meant I was no longer invisible. That night, my daughter called, her voice shaking, asking what I had done, because her card had been blocked and the bank had contacted her for verification. And when I told her I had simply told the truth, she grew silent, and in that silence, I heard fear, the same fear I had felt when my account was taken from me. And for a moment, I felt a strange sense of balance, not revenge, but understanding, because now she knew how it felt to lose control. I hung up feeling both sad and relieved, because I didn't want her to suffer, but I also knew she needed to face the consequences of her choices. And as I sat on my bed, listening to the distant sounds of the city, I thought about the unknown watcher again, about how they seemed to know when things shifted, and I wondered if they were simply observing or actively guiding events, and that uncertainty kept me awake long into the night. Just before midnight, another message arrived, saying, "The truth is closer than you think." And I felt a chill run through me, because I sensed that the biggest revelation was still waiting, something that would change how I saw not just my daughter and sister, but my entire life. And as I stared at the glowing screen, I realized that I was no longer afraid of what was coming, because whatever the truth was, I was finally ready to face it. I woke before dawn with my heart already racing because something in the air felt different, like the moment before a storm breaks. And as I reached for my phone, I saw a new message waiting for me, sent at 4:17 a.m. from the unknown number. And it said, "Today you will finally see me." And those words stayed with me as I made my tea, my hand steady even though my thoughts were racing, because after everything that had happened, I was no longer the woman who waited for others to decide her fate. I was ready to meet whatever truth had been circling my life. A few hours later, my phone rang again, and this time the voice on the other end was not distorted, not hidden, but soft and trembling, and when she said my name, I felt my breath catch, because I recognized that voice immediately, even though I hadn't heard it in years. And in that moment, I understood that the shadow I had feared was not a stranger, but someone connected to my past. Someone I never imagined would step back into my life this way. She told me she was waiting at a small cafe near my old workplace, the one I used to pass every morning. And as I made my way there, my mind filled with questions, with memories, with names I hadn't spoken aloud in a long time. And when I finally walked in and saw her sitting by the window, I felt a mix of shock and sadness because it was my late husband's cousin, a woman who had disappeared from our lives after a bitter family dispute years ago. She stood when she saw me, her eyes filling with tears, and said she had been watching from afar, that she knew about the way my daughter and sister had been managing my affairs, because she worked at the same bank branch years ago and had noticed irregularities, and when she realized what was happening, she couldn't stay silent anymore, so she chose the only way she knew how, by exposing the truth anonymously. And as she spoke, I felt my anger soften into something else, something closer to understanding, because although her methods were frightening, her intention was not to harm me, but to protect me. She apologized for the fear she had caused, for the uncertainty, and I told her that while her actions had shaken me, they had also helped me see what I needed to see. And in that moment, I felt a strange sense of closure, because the shadow that had loomed over my life was finally standing in the light, no longer powerful, no longer mysterious, just human. As we parted, she said, "You deserve to be seen, Nana May." And those words stayed with me as I walked home, because they felt like the beginning of something new. And although many questions still remained, I knew that the biggest secret had been revealed, and now it was up to me to decide how to move forward with the family who had broken my trust. The morning started like any other, but I could feel it, the subtle shift in energy in my own home, the weight of silence that wasn't peace, but anticipation, because after meeting my husband's cousin, I knew the walls were no longer holding secrets for me. They were holding the family accountable, and I had a quiet, burning determination to see exactly how deep the betrayals ran. I walked into the kitchen to make tea, the fridge humming softly, and my mind wandered back to the envelope my daughter had screamed over weeks ago, to the moment she realized I wasn't blind to what she had done. And I realized that the fridge had been more than a hiding place. It had been a symbol, a vault of secrets she thought I wouldn't notice, and now, every corner of my house felt like it could reveal the truth. I reached for the fridge, my hand steady, and opened it slowly, as if expecting more than food to appear inside. And that's when I saw it, a note tucked behind the milk carton, folded carefully. I picked it up, heart pounding. And as I unfolded it, I realized it was from my daughter again, but this time not a voice note, not a hurried message, not a defensive text. It was a confession. She had written everything she had done, the hidden charges, the trips, the loans she never told me about, the emails she had deleted, the transfer she had justified as temporary. And I read each line, my hands trembling, tears forming not from shock alone, but from the quiet satisfaction of finally knowing, finally seeing what had been hidden in plain sight for years. I heard the door click, and she walked in, pausing as she saw me holding her note. Her face was pale, eyes wide, and she whispered, "You read it?" I nodded, and for a moment she seemed frozen, like she was finally facing the weight of what she had done. I didn't mean to hurt you," she stammered, but the words felt small, too small for the truth they carried. I walked closer, placing the note on the counter, and said softly, "Intentions don't erase consequences." She dropped her gaze, the shame in her stance cutting deeper than any argument could have. "Mama, I thought I was helping, she whispered. I shook my head, voice firm but quiet. Help without honesty is betrayal. She bit her lip, trying to argue, but no words came, and I realized this was the first time she truly understood the shift in power between us. I told her to sit, and we spent the next hour going through every transaction, every message, every missed warning. And as we unraveled the web of secrets, I noticed my daughter's hand shaking, her composure cracking, and I felt a mixture of pity and resolve. Because I knew that if she survived this confrontation with dignity, she would finally understand the weight of honesty. Just as I was explaining the implications of her actions, my phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number, and as I played the voice note, a calm but firm voice said, "The next truth is closer than you think. Look where you least expect it." I froze. My eyes darted back to the fridge. Something I had overlooked, perhaps hidden behind the eggs, a small drawer I rarely used, and as I opened it, I found a tiny box, dust-covered, labeled with my handwriting from years ago. Inside were old receipts, contracts, and documents I didn't remember storing, evidence that the financial manipulations extended further than I had realized, that this wasn't only about my pension or one trip, that my daughter and sister had been slowly consolidating control, thinking I would never notice. I felt a flash of anger, sharp and cold, but I also felt clarity, the first true clarity I had had in years. I turned to my daughter, who was pale and trembling. "Do you see now?" I asked. She nodded, tears falling freely. I didn't think you'd ever notice." I shook my head, feeling a mix of sorrow and vindication. "I notice everything. I always have. You just never gave me the chance to act." The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel the shift, the unspoken acknowledgement that the dynamic between us had irrevocably changed. Just as I was about to close the fridge, my daughter whispered, voice quivering, "There's one more thing. I don't know if I should tell you." I froze. I looked at her. My heart hammered in my chest. "Tell me," I said, voice steady, though inside I felt the anticipation, the fear, and the inevitable revelation that would define what happened next. She hesitated, swallowing hard, and then said, It's about the money I didn't take about the other account." I felt my stomach tighten. Another secret. Another layer of betrayal waiting to surface. "What other account?" I asked softly, leaning in. She shook her head, tears streaming. I was told to keep it secret. They said it was for your own good." My pulse raced. My eyes narrowed. The room was silent except for the fridge humming. I realized in that moment that everything I had thought I knew, the manipulations, the betrayals, was only part of the story, and the next revelation would not just shake me, it would shake the foundation of my family entirely. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I stood there, letting the weight of the unknown settle around us, feeling a mixture of dread and determination, because I knew that whatever came next would change everything, and I needed to be ready. My daughter's whispered confession hung in the air like smoke, unanswered questions filling the room, and I knew, without a doubt, that the next move, the next truth, would either break us completely or finally restore the balance that had been stolen for years. And just as I was about to speak, the doorbell rang. I froze. My daughter looked at me. Fear and guilt mingled in her eyes. Neither of us moved. The sound echoed in the quiet house. A shadow outside. Who was it? And why had they come now? The doorbell rang again, louder this time, and my pulse jumped like it was trying to escape my chest. I froze, my hand on the fridge handle, the note from my daughter crumpled slightly in my grip, and I realized that whatever or whoever was outside wasn't just a visitor. It was the next piece of the story, the one that would either destroy the fragile honesty we had just unearthed or force the entire family to confront the truth we had been avoiding for years. My daughter stepped back, eyes wide, trembling, and whispered, "Mama, you shouldn't answer." I didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. The knock came again, more insistent, almost demanding. And then I heard a familiar voice, one I hadn't expected in years, calm, steady, and cold. "Nana May, it's time you saw everything." My stomach dropped. That voice, it was my sister, the one I had trusted, the one I had believed had acted in my best interest. My hand shook as I put down the note and moved to the door, each step heavy, every heartbeat loud in my ears. I opened it slowly, and there she stood, her expression unreadable, eyes sharp, like she was prepared for war. Behind her, two figures I recognized immediately. My daughter's husband and a man I didn't know, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that suggested authority, maybe a lawyer, maybe something else. I see you've discovered some things, my sister said, her voice calm, almost smug, and I felt a wave of anger rise, but it was mixed with fear, because the room now felt like a courtroom, the fridge and papers meaningless compared to the tension coiled around us. What is this about? I asked, my voice steady, though my stomach churned. My daughter stepped forward, hesitant, looking between me and her mother, the tension written on her face. My sister smirked slightly. It's about control, Nana May, about what you've had and what you thought was yours, and more importantly, about the future of this family's wealth. I felt my chest tighten. My words came slowly, measured. The wealth doesn't belong to you to manipulate, and if you thought I wouldn't notice, you were wrong. My sister's eyes narrowed, and she glanced at the man behind her. He stepped forward holding a tablet and said, "Everything has been documented, Mrs. May. The transfers, the accounts, everything you didn't know about, it's all here." I felt my daughter's hand brush against mine, trembling. I could see her fear, her guilt, the recognition that our family's secrets were no longer secrets. I asked, voice shaking slightly, "Why are you doing this now?" My sister tilted her head, expression unreadable. Because someone finally realized that keeping secrets is no longer safe. And it's time the family knows the truth about what's been happening behind their backs. I felt the room spin slightly as the man handed me the tablet. Screens filled with emails, bank statements, property documents, all neatly organized, all pointing to actions I had never authorized, transfers I had never approved, and conversations between my daughter and my sister plotting temporary control over everything I had worked for. My hands trembled as I scrolled, disbelief and fury mixing into a quiet rage. You lied to me for years," I whispered. My sister's expression hardened. "We lied to protect you, to manage you, to prevent chaos." I shook my head. "Protection without consent is betrayal. Every single one of you chose convenience over honesty." My daughter hung her head, tears streaming, and whispered, "I know, Mama. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how far it went until now." I looked at her, heart aching, and then back at my sister. "You thought I was weak. You thought I would stay silent. But that ends tonight." My sister's lips tightened. She glanced at the man again, and he nodded slightly. Then the tablet pinged, another message. From the unknown number. She knows now. Everything will change. My heart skipped. I realized then that this wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. And for the first time in years, I felt the balance shifting, the power moving back into my hands. I took a deep breath and said, "You're right about one thing. Everything will change. But it will change on my terms, not yours." My sister's eyes flickered with surprise, a crack in her armor, and I felt a surge of vindication, of moral authority I had earned silently over decades. But just as I thought I had control, the man behind her spoke again, voice steady and deliberate. "Mrs. May, there's one more document. One last secret. It changes everything." My hands froze. I felt my daughter stiffen. My sister's smirk vanished, replaced by a look I had never seen before, unease. The tablet opened another file. I leaned closer. My eyes widened. My chest tightened. This was bigger than any pension, any trip, any hidden transfer. This was about ownership, inheritance, and a truth that had been deliberately buried for decades. And in that instant, I realized that whatever happened next would either destroy my family completely or finally restore the dignity and authority I had been denied for years. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I held my ground because I knew that when I opened that document fully, my life would never be the same. And then my daughter whispered, voice barely audible, "Mama, are you ready for this?" I looked at her, eyes fierce and steady. "I've been ready my whole life. The tablet glowed in front of me. The secrets of years lay just one swipe away. And that is where we paused, breath held, hearts racing, waiting for the truth that would either destroy or save us. I held the tablet with trembling hands, the glow from the screen illuminating the truth that had been kept from me for years. Every hidden transfer, every secret account, every carefully orchestrated manipulation laid bare. And I felt a mixture of rage, grief, and a strange, powerful relief, because finally, for the first time in a long time, I knew everything, and the person I had trusted most, my daughter, my sister, could no longer hide behind lies. My daughter's tears fell freely, her shoulders shaking, and I realized that she had been forced to face the consequences of her actions in a way I had never imagined. And I felt a quiet satisfaction that justice, at least in this moment, had begun to balance itself. My sister, however, looked stunned, her composure cracking for the first time, and the man beside her, the lawyer, I realized, stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mrs. May," he said, voice steady, calm, but commanding attention, "the documents we have reviewed show that you were the rightful authority over these accounts all along. The transfers and manipulations were unauthorized. Legally, everything reverts to you." I felt my heart skip, a surge of vindication so strong it left me breathless. For decades, I had been silent, patient, forgiving, always giving my trust, only to have it used against me. But now the power had shifted. I was no longer the quiet one. I was the one with authority, with clarity, with control. My daughter stepped closer, sobbing, whispering, "Mama, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." I held her hands, and for the first time, I let myself feel compassion mixed with pride. "I forgive you," I said softly, "but forgiveness does not erase responsibility. You must understand that what was done cannot be undone, but it can be corrected." My sister said nothing, her eyes downcast, realizing that her attempts at justification were meaningless in the face of truth. The lawyer continued, "There is one final matter. A secret account opened decades ago, linked to family property and inheritance. It has remained hidden even from your daughter, and it contains assets you were not aware of. You, Mrs. May, are the sole legal heir. This changes everything." I blinked, the weight of decades of manipulation finally lifting, replaced with the clarity that the legacy I had thought lost, stolen, and hidden was now entirely mine. My mind raced with questions, possibilities, responsibilities, and for a moment, I just breathed, letting the power of that truth sink in. Then the lawyer handed me a small envelope, thick and heavy with the weight of revelation. I opened it slowly. Inside were property deeds, bank documents, and legal confirmations, all in my name, fully authorized, completely untouchable. My heart pounded with disbelief and relief. I had been silent for so long, too patient, too forgiving, too accommodating. But now, with my name on every page, I understood that patience had its reward, that dignity, once restored, cannot be taken lightly. My daughter hugged me, sobbing into my shoulder, and I held her tight, whispering that everything would be okay. While my sister lingered at a distance, silent, perhaps realizing for the first time that true authority cannot be faked or stolen. It must be earned and respected. Then the lawyer cleared his throat again, and my attention snapped to him, heart pounding. "Mrs. May," he said slowly, "there is one more matter you need to know. Someone else has been involved all this time. Someone whose decisions have affected not only your finances, but your family's future, and they are still watching." My stomach tightened. I knew immediately what he meant. Someone beyond my daughter and sister, a deeper layer of family, a shadow I had not anticipated, whose influence stretched across the years, whose power had manipulated events from behind the scenes, and whose presence meant that this story, though resolved in part, was far from over. I looked at the lawyer, voice firm but steady. "Who is it?" He hesitated, then said, "I cannot disclose yet. But soon you will know. And when that day comes, Mrs. May, it will change everything once more." My daughter clutched my hand tightly, fear and curiosity mingling in her gaze, and I felt the surge of protective instinct rise in me, not just for myself, but for the family I was slowly reclaiming. I took a deep breath and whispered more to myself than anyone else. I've survived betrayal. I've reclaimed what is mine. Whatever comes next, I will face it. Outside, the city lights shone faintly through the window, indifferent to the turmoil inside my home, but I knew that inside those walls, everything had changed. And just as the lawyer turned to leave, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. I opened it slowly, heart pounding, and the words on the screen were simple, chilling, and impossible to ignore. The next truth is yours to uncover. Be ready. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and determination, because I knew that the end of one betrayal was only the beginning of another, and that my story, my life, was far from over. But for the first time in decades, I felt a strength I had never known. I was no longer powerless. I was Nana May, and whatever secrets lay ahead, I was ready to face them.